lesson number 2 or discussion number 2 for Torah for the Nations for our Torah study group. And we thank you for joining in and being with us. And we got, how are we going to put that? Terry and Pesach, Pesach and Terry, T and P.
It's just us. It's just us.
It's just us hosts here. And I want everybody to know you can ask any single question you want, but this is not a debate club. So we're here to process and give information, accept it, reject it, do what you want with it. It's okay with us. But we're here to help in any questions you may have. So right now I see we have, of course, Terry and Pesach are here. Troy is here. Marinella is here. And so is Lenore. Good to see you. And Fran, I see her name up there, so I guess she's here. How you doing, Fran? And feel free to ask questions or whatever. And let's see, I better open up the chat side. There we go. In case anybody types in a chat message.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about
Last week, we spent the time talking about our 2 different natures inside of us, the animal nature and the godly nature. And I just wanted to put a little thing on that. And Terry did some great blogs in the past week at Emunah Trek. And if you haven't read them, you make sure you go and read them. They're really good. Terry is really good at explaining things in a way that everybody understands, even me. So I appreciate that, Terry. But just for a minute to go into the animal, and we all know we have a soul. Everybody's got a soul. Everybody knows that, no question. The problem is the soul, some people call it 2 souls, some people call it one inside the other. We have the animal soul, which controls the body, makes us eat what we want to eat, or even more than what we want to eat. and it gives us our emotions, our anger, our jealousies, our lusts, and all the other things that go along with it. Of course, procreation and when to sleep and when to get up. And that's good because we need that. But we also have the godly soul inside of us that sits and watches what the animal soul is doing. Now, I'm going to make a statement now that some people aren't going to like too much, but I got to do it. The Alter Rebbe from Baal Shem Tov has learned and has written in his book called the Tanya that our personalities, who we are basically our animal soul. From the time we come out of the womb until we decide that we want the godly part of us to have more control. And how do we do that? This is the question everybody has. How do we stop acting like the animal that is in all of us? God created everything, and we're all animals, and all the mammals are all the same. We have the same wants and needs and everything else. Cats are cats, dogs are dogs, human beings are human beings. What makes us more than everybody else is we can think, we can choose, we can weigh things. And it helps us see things more clearly, what we're doing and how we're living our life, if we want it to. So the thing that we try to do is constantly work on ourselves for the godly soul to be able to control the animal soul, not kill it, not crush it, not destroy it, just control it so that we act in a more, we're creating God's image in a more godly way. In other words, we don't get as angry with people, we don't say cruel things to people, we don't do cruel things to people or animals and things like that. So this is what we all are trying to learn. But we have a big problem, every single one of us. The problem is the animal soul has learned so much and how to control so much that we think that everything that comes out of our mind is true sometimes. We don't think about, let's see if it's 2 and 2 is 4. Let's see if we're looking at it in the proper way, because perspective is everything. If you look at it from the animal side, you're going to agree with it because that's who we are. But to do it from the godly side, you have to look at it and say, wait a minute, what is God, my creator, my father, my king, what does he expect of me? And then you compare it to how you run your life, You say, wait a minute, he's expecting more. So the godly soul has to influence the animal soul to do the proper thing. Some of the biggest things that we have problems with are things that we've been taught all our lives. We were taught it, whether Islam or Jewish or Christianity or whatever we are, we've been taught these things, and they are a part of us. They're an innate part of us, and our minds work in a very structured way according to the way we were brought up. Terry today put up a couple of blogs that were just, he like separates a whole section of things. And it's something that we call this in Hebrew teaching a hidush. It's something that someone sees that's there. You can't contradict it. You can't say it's wrong. And you look at it and it's logical. And I think because Terry is not Jewish, he's had a lot of training in it. It helped him in doing this, but because I've been Jewish my whole life, I never saw it in this perspective that Terry saw it. Terry, you want to talk a little bit about what your blogs were today?
It all started with, I don't know if you've read my blog on Genesis 8:22. Several months ago, I came across a teaching on Genesis 8:22 that disturbed me. I'll be honest with you, when I first read it, it sounded and read what the sages wrote, what it meant, the understanding. Right off the bat, I thought, okay, another twisted scripture, what a preacher wants to mean. And so I said, well, like Pesach says, you got to sometimes, that's the animal side, what you're used to. And so I knew that because of my relationship with what I've had learning from the sages and the rabbis in the past, I knew that there was more to what I was seeing. So I just put it on the back burner. Then, lo and behold, Troy posts an article one day, and the last very paragraph, the Lubavitcher Rebbe explains it in a way that totally opened up my understanding of what the sages were saying. And I was almost to the point, why didn't they say that to begin with? But my last 3 blogs stem from that issue. And while I had been pondering and meditating and studying this issue, I'll be honest with you, I was laying in bed one night and I couldn't go to sleep. It was 2:30 in the morning. I got up, got a drink of water, and I laid there, couldn't go to sleep. And then all of a sudden, the issue with the ark and the tabernacle came to my mind. And then I started thinking about how God tied the Sabbath to the tabernacle, but he didn't tie the seventh day to the building of the ark. And so I went back and I looked at the commandments of God telling Noah to build the ark and God telling Israel to build the tabernacle. And I looked at them side by side and started seeing the differences in the commandment of God saying, you build this and you build that. And that was just like my mind just started going off. And that was the blog I wrote last night, actually. And I was just able to see this last week, there's been several of these where I have read this stuff now for over 10, 12 years. But I just thought it was part of the story. I never saw that there was really a message to us in that story. There's another rabbi mentioned, and he was talking more or less about the Jews in it, and it deals with Noah. And I'm like, I started seeing, oh, wait, there's a huge message for the Noahides in it. I hadn't written on it yet. But it's a piece of Noah's story that I have read 100 times, just, Jack bounced the ball. That's what it looked like. But there's more to it than that. And so, yeah, I saw in this last blog, in the meditating on the ark and the tabernacle, I've always believed in the separation of Israel and the nations. It really came more evident to me when I understood when God commanded Noah to build this and he commanded Israel to build this, and in what was built in those commands or what was not built in those commands. And that's another way of studying Hebrew is there's a lot to learn from what's not being said. And so I looked at my studies, Hebrew studies, it let me see these differences. And when God gave Noah the command to build the ark, he did not give him any instructions on a time of ceasing. He had to build this ark. It took him so many years. I've got a book that says it took him about 56 years to actually build it. The rest of the 120, he gathered trees, planted them, let them grow, and then he harvested them. So, but it was a continuum. From the time he commanded, Noah had to work without ceasing. From the time he planted the cedars to the time he harvested them, to the time he milled them, to the time he built them, to the time he walked in the ark, Noah and his family had no ceasing time for religious ritual studies or religious ritual Sabbaths. But Israel, on the other hand, right at the beginning of the tabernacle, it says, remember, you don't work on the Sabbath. You don't do this and this. And so the sages took that and says, okay, what's it take to build the tabernacle? And that's where we get the 39 melachot, the 39 creative activities that took to build the tabernacle. God said, don't do this on the Sabbath. But he did not give that instruction to Noah. It's the same God giving two peoples a instructions to build something. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's even more than interesting. It's very timely. This week's Torah portion is Ki Tisa, when you do. And it talks about the building of the tabernacle. And it talks about the separation of work between people in building the tabernacle.
Mm-hmm.
If you read it in detail, what's going on, what you find out is that people brought what they could bring, but the people that did the work had to be people that knew what they were doing. And there were two people, Betzalel and Aholiab, were the artisans, and Betzalel was the head guy, and then there was Aholiab, and they were the two that actually the construction was under them. And at the same time he's telling them about this, he says, oh, by the way, remember Shabbat. You cannot do any work, even to build my holy temple, even to build my place here on earth. You don't do any work on Shabbat for that. So he told us, those who are builders of this tabernacle, stop what you're doing on Friday afternoon, enjoy the Shabbat, enjoy a day off. I got the rest of it handled. You guys rest. And that's what we did, and that's what we do. And as we go on in this Torah portion this week, we find out that Israel, the group of people, were expecting Moses to be back in 40 days, and they did a miscount in the number. And so we have here, and I know it's not written this way in the Torah, but it's written this way in our history of our people in our separate books, that a small group of people that had come out of Egypt that were used to worshiping idols went around everybody saying, come on now, look, Moses is gone. He was our interface between us and God. We got to have an interface. We got to have an interface. We can't have the lamb because you guys killed our lamb when you came out of Egypt. You killed the God that was represented by the lamb. So let's use a bull. And they started going through, and of course there were some Israelis, some Jewish people that got involved in it too. I think total number was 3,000 out of 2.5 million people that were there, which is a very small number. So why is this even remembered? Because it's a lesson for us to learn from. First of all, the separation of work. God says, you do this for me. Over here he says, no, you don't do that. Here's what you're going to do. I don't care what you want to do. Here's what you're going to do. So in everything we see all through the 5 books of Moses, and we see in all of the Tanakh, is God appoints people to do work. And that's what he expects them to do, what he tells them to do, if you've accepted him as king. If you've accepted him as your father, you obey. He expects you to do that work. How many times in my life have I heard, not from Jewish people, but from other people, well, I read this in Ezekiel, I read this in Isaiah, or I read this. I know just talking to me and God wants me to do this. He wants me to do that. Because I read it, even though he was talking to one of the prophets, I just know he wanted me to do it. Mm-hmm. Even though their name's not there. You know, God gives us each what to do under what we call Hashgacha Pratit, divine providence. And it's right in front of us every day when we wake up and get out of bed, what he wants us to do. The first thing he expects to us, it's all of us, whether we're Jew or non-Jew, to follow those 7 universal laws that Noah has passed on, and then Moses got it at Mount Sinai, and we have to know we're doing it because God wants us to do it. But getting back to what we're talking about, we don't get to choose randomly or because we feel good about it, this is what we're supposed to do for God. He opens the door in front of you, and it's real clear if you're looking. See, Shira and I work with the Noahide community, not because we were reading something one day and said, oh man, God's speaking to us, let's go do this. Because he actually opened the door for us to do it. And there's a huge difference in those two things. We never thought about doing this.
Neither did I. I planned on converting.
Yeah, there you go. But God opens the door he wants you to walk through, and it's up to you to recognize that's what it is. Because if you don't do it, then, well, I've approached that way sometimes in my life, and I end up with what I call a bloody forehead, banging my head against the brick wall, because you don't get anywhere. We've all had that experience. But some of us are too hard-headed to say, well, I guess I'm not supposed to be going here, I'll go over there. And by the way, in case I didn't welcome Fran back, she's back. Glad her computer got straightened out. So let's back up a little bit.
Can I mention one more thing about my blog? About what I?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Toward the end of my blog, as I was meditating on things last night, one of the cries from the Noahide movement is that they misunderstand the rabbis when in the Rambam and things when it says that we are not permitted to have a Sabbath any time or any day of the week. And so they're like, oh, I'm supposed to just work 7 days a week without rest. That's not what the rabbis are teaching. They're teaching that we're not supposed to have a ritual Sabbath, which we don't have a Sabbath. We have a seventh day. The Sabbath, like Pesach showed me, we have a seventh day. The Sabbath was given to Israel. The Sabbath has a total meaning of itself. The seventh day has a meaning of itself. And we were given the seventh day. But as I've been writing these last 3 blogs, Genesis 8:2 is not by itself. There are no chapters in the Torah scroll. And so when you bring Genesis 9:1, the very next verse, which is God blessed Noah and his sons and totally fruitful, multiply and fill the earth. Well, fill the earth, yeah, filling it with people, but filling it also means to settle and habit, which includes a whole ton of work, which we don't have to mention. And the rabbis are saying we can't have a day to recruit from our labors. And I got to thinking about this, and I'm like, and I keep saying we are partners with the earth. And then I got to looking at the way the earth works. And I didn't grow up on a farm. My grandparents were farmers. I had a lot of farming neighbors. So I grew up around farms. And my grandpa was a tobacco farmer in Kentucky. Well, after he harvested the tobacco, he would let the land grow fallow. And a lot of times he would plant a different plant there for the next season because one thing, tobacco will suck the nitrogen out of the ground. Troy probably knows, being from Kentucky, about tobacco. And so they disc the ground, they disc it up and they let it up, and they'll put, corn stalks, and they put vegetation there to let it rot go back into the ground and let the ground heal from the planting and the harvesting of a plant. That's called laying fallow. And we can learn from that. The land produced, the land harvested, now it's in fallow. But the fallow is not only a rest, but it's a preparing for the very next duty. And so we can use that as an example that we work 5-6 days a week, no matter what day it is. We might take a day and go to the lake, go to a park, sleep in that morning, get up, study, tour a little bit, whatever we need to do. It's still part of continuing. We've not stopped. Israel has to cease. Israel has to cease creative activities like Hashem did. We don't have that commandment. But even our rest is a preparation of the next duty. So even our rest is a continuation. And I just that just blew my mind up. Like, wow, so much we can learn from how the earth works is how we're to be partners with it. So I get excited when I see these things.
I want to add one thing to this, because we can go back before Noah. We can go to Adam and see that Adam was created and set down in the Garden of Eden. And what was his job? To shomer, to keep the world, just like he's supposed to be keeping it today. We're supposed to take care of it, water it, make it nice, make it clean. We've kind of failed in that part of what God wanted us to do. All of us have, just as a group of people, human beings. But that was the original intention for human beings. Take care of the land, take care of each other, take care of everything, make it good, and have a whole lot of kids. And that's what he wanted from us. Then there came a time when he separated a small group of people, 70 people, if you remember, went down to Egypt from the rest of the world and said, okay, now I need you to do something for me. I need you to teach the world about me, who he was. Because he had hidden himself so well in creation, everybody knew, oh, I'm going to pray to this God. I need this. And wait a minute, where's my God for my olive oil? And where's my God for my crops? Everybody, because you couldn't explain anything except that way in those days. So God said it's time, actually he told Abraham, it's time for the whole world to know who I am. And he sent 70 people down into Egypt and brought 2.5 million out just to show the whole world, here I am. I'm God. I'm in control. I am your God. I'm a loving God. I just know who I am. Recognize me and know who I am, and go about your business. Don't have any other gods. Seek the God by having another God in front of him. It's the same as adultery. You're in love with somebody else, or giving the same love to somebody else that you're giving to him. So, hello, Veronica, and welcome. So, the separation of work came over periods of time through history, and after the flood, of course, and Noah got the 7 universal laws that were to be given to everybody, all mankind, everybody, every single one of us. And then he separated another group out and says, okay, the time has come now, you're going to teach everyone who I am. He wants everybody to know him. If you look back in Isaiah, it's going to say the time's going to come when the whole world, every person on earth will know who I am. Nobody's going to have to teach anybody else. Nobody. Not brothers, sisters, not this, not that. Nobody's going to have to teach, because everybody's going to know who I am. Well, we're trying to get to that point now, where everybody just knows who our king is, who our father is. He's your father, he's my father. But you still have to accept him as your king. He can't be a king to you unless you accept him as king. Back in the feudal times in England and Scotland and across Europe, a king would come in and he'd take over a land. He says, okay, now I'm your king. Did everybody accept him as king? No. Some did, some didn't. And that's what caused wars and all kinds of other things. God simply says, accept me as your king. I'm your father, yes. I'm going to take care of you. I give you life. I'm going to feed you. I'm going to give you everything you need, but I also am your king. So it's important that we remember that. And when we read something that he wants done, it's not, well, I don't think so today. Well, maybe tomorrow. This is what he wants us to do. And he separated us into different groups of people, and we have the responsibility to know what is our part, God's plan for this whole world. Our part, each one of us is different. Whether we're Jewish, whether we're Gentile, each person has their own part to do, or you wouldn't be around. You wouldn't be watching us right now in this program. You have your part to do, but you have to kind of learn what it is that he wants you to do. We know one thing as Jews, our whole life, we could be here for one reason. The reason could be to save somebody's life, to do them a favor sometime in their life, or something. Just that one mitzvah, that one good deed. It could be that. So we all have to accept something really big. And that what we have to accept is what we think isn't probably exactly right. We have to search for the truth. We have to search, and search for the truth. And we have to know that whatever we think, there's something beyond it. One of the things that I don't know, Terry, I'm going to say it anyway. One of the things that Terry learned through his journey into the going to convert and then deciding, no, I don't belong there. I belong where I belong. To do what I was created to do. He realized that in his heart where he's supposed to be is exactly where he is. But in the meantime, he learned something very important. And this is one of the biggest things and the hardest things people learn is what we think maybe isn't right and maybe isn't truth and maybe isn't the most important thing. And what we get from our forefathers could have the same problem. You know, there's a phrase that God, Hashem, tells people that I will punish the sons for the sins of the father from generation to generation. We think we got to pay a bill for something else. No, when you go into the teaching of it, it is if my father taught me something that was wrong, if I don't change it, and I teach my sons, I'm in the same situation as my father was. I have a chance to change it. I have a chance to break out of this rut that I am in, that I've been put in, and I can change. And it's okay to change. A lot of people have told me over the years, well, I wouldn't change what I think because this is what my parents taught me, and I'm supposed to honor my mother and father. And that's what my grandparents did, and that's what my great-grandparents did. That is true, but you don't dishonor them by coming to the truth. Our relatives used to carry fire around in little pots because when they saw it burning somewhere, they'd collect it up and put it in a pot because they didn't even know how to light a fire. And they said, this is the way you carry fire. Guess what? They learned, oh, wow, we can make fire by two sticks together. We can make by flint and rock together. There's different ways to make fire, so you don't have to carry this little hot pot around with us all the time. And by the way, we read about the Akedah, when Abraham takes Isaac up to the hill, he carries the wood, he carries the knife, and he carries the fire pot. So everything, as you learn new things, your perspective changes, and it's okay to change. Just because my father carried around a fire pot doesn't mean I have to. My father might have taught me, boy, don't you go anywhere without that fire pot. You're going to get cold out there at night and that. But then all of a sudden I find out, wait a minute, I don't have to do that. I can hit two rocks together and I got myself a fire. So am I dishonoring my father by not carrying the fire pot? Absolutely not. So
There's a Gentile story very similar to that.
what's that?
There was a newlywed couple that had they gotten married. They were settling down. The wife one night decides to cook a roast. So she pulls this roast out and she cuts the end of the roast off and puts it in her pan to put in the oven. Her husband said, "Why'd you cut the end of that roast off?" She goes, "I don't know. It's what Mom always done." So the woman calls her mom. "Mom, my husband wants to know why I'm cutting the end of the roast off. I'm doing what you always taught me to do. Why'd you cut the end of the roast off?" She said, "Because my pan was too small."
There you go. That's
Nice.
we have to, one of the biggest lessons that God wants us to learn, and He shows us, is you have to be humble. What does it mean to be humble? It means we have to understand that what we think may not be totally correct, and we can learn more. We can learn reasons for things. We don't have to hang on to something just because we don't have to cut the end of the roast off every time we throw it in the pan, because I probably got a bigger pan.
Exactly.
And believe me, today, people have, their minds are more, talk to a 5-year-old today. My goodness, the intelligence of a 5-year-old. When I was 5, I wasn't thinking about this stuff. I was rolling around in the dirt and jumping in mud puddles, But a 5-year-old can teach their parents or their grandparents how to use an iPhone, probably. What a difference. And we just have to let ourselves go with that. We have to allow it to come into us, but it has to be based on something pretty important. It has to be based on something called belief or faith. Now, I know a lot of definitions, faith is something unseen, but that's not quite true. You have to believe in God, and when you believe in Him, I'll get to you in a second, Marinella. When you believe in Him, then you have to have the intelligence to put things together. If you can't put it together, it doesn't make any sense at all to do. Everything that our Creator, our King, our Father has done is done very logically, and He lets us understand it to the best of our ability for each one of us. Marinella, you had a question? You want to say something?
Yes, about believe. For me, that is a word that I now interpret differently, and I don't know if and the reason why I change it and it's more real to me is because we can believe in many things, right? I mean, the belief thing is like you believe, but at the same time, there's a little bit of doubt in that, But when you trust, when you really trust, and I think that's the journey of every one of us, to really trust God, to get to the point where He's real, that He's real. Like this cup of tea, like it's real. I mean, it's physical, but in the spiritual realm, God is real. It's like, I'm gonna give you an example. Every time I have, I'm craving for something, little thing. Oh, I wish I could have a little bit of milk. I know if I search, I'm gonna find milk or salt or anything that is sometimes I don't have it, But if I say, I know I have it, it's like trusting, here it comes, God respond to me. It's so wonderful, so beautiful because there's no lacking, when you really trust, when you connect with that force, that He has for us as human beings. I don't know, I just want to add that because I learned that through time, because before I believed, but the belief thing is a little tricky. But I understand, everybody has to come and be understanding of God, in different levels. And I'm perfectly fine with that. I understand. I just wanted to add this.
Marinella, trust is the action of belief. They go hand in hand. You can't have trust without belief. Belief is the action. It's the doing. It's the doing part of faith.
Oh, I see. Okay, now I understand. Yeah, because
Terry, you're absolutely right. But I want to take this one step further and not to demean or make fun of anybody. But the main thing is, when we were growing up, our parents told us things that we absolutely believed because we trusted our parents. And then we found out later that they didn't tell us truthful things. This was a setup for us being able, from the animal side of us, to accepting something even if we have no proof of it. But you can't, if you look, a lot of people are coming and reading the Bible in a very intellectual way. They want to know this, they want to know that. It's like knowing mathematics, knowing how to paint a picture, knowing how to fix a car. They see it and they know it. Okay, this is very intellectual, but intellectually you cannot grasp God and the truth behind what you're reading until you first believe in God. Look, emunah is meaning to be faithful, not having faith. Emunah truly translated as faithful. You are faithful to God. If you have emunah, you're faithful, which means you do what they say to do. You what God says to do. You just trust it. You're faithful to Him. But the thing is, there's intelligence behind it. Faith without intelligence is worth nothing. Intelligence without faith is worth just so I can make some money being a car mechanic. I can make some money being a nuclear scientist. I have this intelligence that I can use. You know, it's funny, and this question I've had, and nobody's been able to answer it for me yet. But when somebody gets ill, they go to a doctor that somebody might recommend to them, and they get their disease diagnosed, and then they go do whatever the doctor tells them to do to be healed. They don't say, wait a minute, I know you're a doctor, but I can do it better. You've studied it, you know it, you've done this before, and you know it. But when it comes to knowing God, everybody says, I don't need you to tell me about God. I don't need to know about this. I know who God is. Well, those people are kidding themselves. Or God would not have given the Jews a job to go out and teach the world who He is. We think because we think something special, that's who He is. And you can't tell me that that's not who He is. And I've taught people in classes all over the United States, and there's always somebody that stands up and says, well, you may think that's what it says, but I think it means this, so that's what it means. Without doing the background study, without getting into it, and getting into the things that were there. Let's see, Fran says, I can only relate to someone that what faith is in God by what some truly amazing things have been done in my life. And that's true, but know something about God. Whether you know truly who He is or don't know truly who He is, He's going to do amazing things for you anyway. He doesn't care if you're Hindu or Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Navajo Indian. He doesn't care. You're His child.
I was asked this very question last night by someone. How could God heal people who are Christian or other religions, if they don't know Him truly, if they're in idolatry or in some other sin? And I said, it's simple. Psalms 145, I believe, verse 9, it says, Hashem loves all, and His mercy is on all His works.
Exactly.
And that is the answer. Regardless of who you are, His love is on all, and His mercy is on all, regardless of who you are.
That's exactly right. Look, He's your Father. You may not have accepted him as king, but he's still your father. So he still loves you. He's a God of love. We're all in the same boat, exactly. All of us. Doesn't make any difference who we are. We're all in the same boat, and we're his kids. And when you accept him, here's the difference. When you're out in some other religion somewhere, some other ism or something, that your prayers get through to him, which can happen, and there can be a healing. But he's only your father. He's not your king. He's not the one that you proclaim is ruling your life. You still want to rule your life. With your dad, you walk out from under his house, you're ruling your own life. Man, I got my own, I can remember that. I got my first apartment, I'm on my own, big boy now, And he would come to me and tell me things that later on in life I found out that if I had listened to him, I'd have probably been better off than listening to myself. But he was my father. I never made my father my king. I've made God my king. By making him my king, I say to him, yes, I know I'm your son, and I know you love me, and I know you take care of me, but I'm going to do what you tell me to do. And I'm not going to let anybody take me off of that. You are the one and only king. And the only time you ever communicated with humanity at all was you wanted to introduce yourself to the world. And when you brought the Israelites or the Hebrews at that time out of Egypt, so all the world could see what you did. And you appointed us to go tell the world who he is. And I have to live by a set of rules the king put in front of me that for most of my life I had a hard time living by them. Now that I'm living by them, I'm having a harder time doing them right. So, but he doesn't say everybody has to do that. He's the king of everybody. Do you know that he's the king of the cats and the dogs and the trees and the birds and the fish in the sea? And every one of those things do exactly what they're told to do. They can't even think differently. Okay, 1 minute, Marianne. They have to do. They don't have a choice. But he says, because you're my son and daughter, I'm giving you something they don't have. You're in my image. You can choose what you're going to do. You can choose to make me your king or not. When we read praises, the Psalms, and we read things, it talks about mountains skipping with joy and waters singing and declaring God's holiness, because they all know who he is. They don't even get a chance to think about it. Even the angels were constantly praising him in heaven. We're the ones that he said, you're my children. I'm going to make you just like me. And he gives us the ability to think through everything we're doing. And then we can go to him and say, yes, Father, you are my king. And I'm going to do exactly, and I'm going to live my life. And I'm not going to be sitting in the back seat of the car saying, hey, she touched me. Whoop, he hit me over here, and start problems. I'm going to just live peaceably with all my siblings, all my brothers and sisters on this planet. And I'm not going to want their stuff, and they're not going to want my stuff. And period. That's the end of it. We're going to be in peace. And that's the whole goal here. When Messiah comes, what's everybody know? Peace. And everybody's going to have what they need to sustain themselves each day, and everything's going to be fine. But you have to declare God king in your life.